Hello, my name is Jeremy, and I will be going through the first part of this presentation. The presentation is going to be about the elicitation techniques, specifically the scenarios technique. So first of all, what is the scenario? The definition of a scenario, of the scenario technique, is scenarios are narrative and specific descriptions of current and future process, including actions and interactions between the users and the system. This was defined by Zagli in his paper, Requirements, Elicitation, a Survey of Techniques, Approaches, and Tools. Another way to understand this definition is scenarios describe real-world experiences of the users when using the system. It models use cases by describing the sequences of events. How do we use the scenario technique? Goldsmith in his paper suggested a problem pyramid of 6 steps to be performed in sequence. The first step is to identify the problem. The second step is to identify measures of reality of the problem, basically making sure that the problem actually exists. Identify goal measures to show that the problem is addressed and the value of meeting it. Identify the causes of the problem. Define business wants or requirements that must be delivered to meet the requirements. Specify a product design that satisfies the requirements. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the scenario method? Alistair Sutcliffe identifies the following advantages of the scenario method. The first advantage is it helps address the devil in the details. If we want to understand the details about the requirements more, the scenario method is very advantageous at this. It also helps link the specific with the general. It helps us to see a more specific picture of the requirements. It helps eliminate assumptions that we often have about requirements. And it helps test models and specifications. The disadvantages of the scenario method include specific scenarios might not represent the whole project. It also might introduce confirmation bias. We might only seek positive examples that agree with our perceptions. Also, gathering scenarios can be costly.
My name is Thomas Nielson. I'll be doing the last part of the presentation. So for the recommendations, we wanted to compare them to their alternatives provided in this week's reading. The 3 alternatives to the scenarios is the domain, the ethnography, and the viewpoints. So with the domain analysis, that took more of an expertise view of the system, which sometimes you do not have. It also takes time and the money away from those experts to know it. So if you know the system really well, that is a disadvantage that scenarios don't have to deal with. And ethnography, the issue with that one compared to the scenarios, you sometimes have a limitation on how you view the cultures. Like if a culture views something as bad versus some other culture, it sometimes, if you have too many cultures, it can get out of hand with how you're going to view it. Finally, the viewpoints, it's similar in scenarios that it goes through the principles of what you're trying to look at from different angles. However, there's no real details like Jeremy mentioned, is that the devil's was in the details with a scenario with how many different points of view is more of a broader spectrum compared to scenarios. And then if you compare that to the scenarios, it's if you want to come up with details, the results, sometimes if you don't need a complete wrap up, you may want to go with viewpoints. If you want to know what other people are looking for in the app, you may want to go in the ethnography. If you want to just keep the experts and no one else, you don't need to have someone that doesn't know what's going on within the app. Then it may be best to go with if you want the experts, you may want to go with the main. But the scenarios is you don't need those things to make a good app out of it in our case. So we broke this down, our scenarios, or the data that we were able to break down. We broke it down into the users, their permissions, and each one of their functions. For the users, there's 3 different users that we were able to come up with the app. We have the student user, the professor, and then the super user, or the admins. Each of them has a different permissions as well as functions that each of them can perform, with the students being the most numerous and the super users being the least. Which that brings us to the scenarios for the students. We wanted to have the student named Sally. She has to open the app, so she clicks on the app on the home page of the smartphone, which brings her to the login screen. After she gets into the login screen, she actually forgets her password. So she clicks on the button to access that forgotten password segment, the interface for that. The text box pops up, and she's able to put in her email to recover her password. And then she clicks the submit button, which consequently submits a request. After she gets into her email, after she gets in, she wants to send an email off to her professor about one of her assignments that she has due. Once she sends off that, email prompt will pop up. She selects the class and the professor she wants to send the message to, and then she types it and sends it off to the professor by clicking on the submit button, and it's delivered to them. Then Sally accesses the assignment interface to see what's due. She clicks on the assignment that she wants to submit. She clicks the submit button, which loads the interface to look at what's inside the smartphone, that device, and then she selects the appropriate assignment. She clicks the submit button, which uploads it to the database, and the professor is notified when that is updated. Then you have the professor. The professor has all the same permissions as the students do. So Brother Smith logs into his app version. He really wants to go in there and change an assignment. So he goes in, clicks on the assignment he wants to change, which loads the interface. He clicks on the modify button. He wants to add a requirement in there. So he puts in the text field the information that he wants to add to the assignment. And then he also wants to change the date because he did add more things on the assignment. So he goes in and changes the deadline by clicking on change deadline button, which brings up a calendar. He clicks on the button, and then he's able to save that. After he's updates that, he goes back and saves the information, which emails and notifies all of the students that are inside the class. Finally, you have the super user. The super user, Professor Jones, Professor Jones, his permissions for some reason was changed to a student. He contacts the admin, which admin logs into the app and corrects the permissions, clicking on the permissions button for Professor Jones, and searches for him, clicks on the professor's name, drops down, do the drop-down menu, and to change him from a student to a professor, and then he presses confirm, and that changes his information. So that is just a few of our scenarios that we came up with. As you saw, there was many other scenarios that we could have came up with, and it would be a lengthy discussion. But we do thank you for listening to our presentation, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. And thank you so very much for your time.